A new year, but a familiar threat as China sends warplanes within a few kilometers of Taiwan's airspace. Long lines at Taiwan's main airport after ground staff at the country's second biggest airline go on strike. Nearly 30% of passengers arriving from China test positive for COVID-19. And a long-lost indigenous settlement is revealed as excavators dig up artifacts in southern Taiwan. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. Taiwan's military reported this year's first incursion of Chinese warplanes into its air defense identification zone over the weekend. Last year saw Chinese military activity around the island hit record highs. This has prompted a debate on what else Taiwan can do to bolster its defenses. Jaime reports.
No more than 9 hours after Taiwan rang in the new year, familiar reports from the military were already coming in. On Sunday, Chinese warplanes had once again entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported a total of 15 Chinese aircraft either crossing the median line or the southern western corner of the ADIZ. The area is not the country's airspace, but is used by Taiwan's military as a security buffer zone. The recent incursion reportedly had planes about 25 kilometers away from Taiwan's coast. This has prompted experts to urge the country to improve how it tracks warplanes in the area.
增加这些雷达对于周边这个掌握的能力增加，但是应处能力那事实上跟不上的海军它的应处的船舰对应这个解放军海军它这个相关的这个活动，我们会疲于奔命哦。
China, which claims Taiwan as part of its territory, has been stepping up its military pressure in recent years. In 2021, Taiwan reported over 970 incursions from China into the ADIZ. In 2022, that number shot up to over 1,700. Operating warplanes around the island nation is meant to wear down Taiwan's forces and blur the lines of what is considered an act of war, a method known as gray zone tactics.
中共抓到我们的把柄了，抓到我们的弱点。中共现在是他只扰台不攻台。 那只扰台不攻台，所有防空飞弹是没效的。它不攻台，你不能发射。
In response, Taiwan's military has been ramping up its combat readiness. Last week, President Tsai Ing-wen announced that mandatory military service for men would be extended from 4 months to a year. There are also plans to purchase more defensive systems from the United States. Though only days into the new year, the military standoff between the two nations seems likely to continue well into 2023. Patrick Chen and Jaime for TaiwanPlus.
Officials in the northern city of Taoyuan are calling for negotiations after workers at Taiwan's second biggest airline went on strike. Ground crew staff at EVA Airways collectively took annual leave on Sunday in protest at their annual bonuses, leading to long delays at Taiwan's main airport. Stash Butler has the story.
Chaos at Taoyuan Airport. Luggage piled up at Taiwan's international hub on Sunday after EVA Air baggage handlers went on strike. The backlog delayed more than 50 of the airline's flights and impacted over 3,000 passengers.
因为疫情啊，怕有什么额外的什么不知道的没有预期的事情，所以说特别早了2-3个小时到。
其实我们很久没有回家，其实我觉得对一些在海外的台湾人也会影响蛮大的。对啊，劳资应该好好冷静的好好沟通。
Ground crews are striking because of pay inequality at their parent company, Evergreen. Workers at the huge conglomerate's shipping company got a year-end bonus worth nearly 45 months' salary this year. But ground crews here got just 1 month's bonus. One worker, whose voice has been altered, said they had no choice but to strike.
很多东西都被牺牲掉，那只是说我们没有办法，今天才说可能会要走到后续的什么动作干嘛的，那可能那是逼不得已的。
This isn't the first industrial action Evergreen has faced. In 2019, EVA Air flight attendants walked out for almost a month. Passengers in Taiwan hope this ground crew dispute will get resolved much faster. Evergreen has apologized for the impacted flights, but some ground staff maintained their strike into Monday, causing more delays. And with no word on any deal between management and workers, there's no telling when the strike will end. Liao and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about the strike, our reporter Stash Butler spoke to labor rights activist Roy Ng.
Can you explain a little bit about how people tend to kind of expect these kinds of things and why the workers here would have been disappointed with the deal they got from Evergreen?
There are actually quite a number of bonuses across the whole year that employers do provide for workers in Taiwan. When workers actually negotiate for their wages, they do not just think of the monthly wages that they are paid, they also think in terms of the bonuses they are paid in their determination of the wages.
The workers that are striking at Taoyuan Airport today are not part of a union. This is sort of a self-initiated, spontaneous strike, if you like. And how unusual is it for workers like this not to be unionized?
The labor unionization rate in Taiwan is relatively low. The successful attempts we have seen in Taiwan have been mainly in the transport industry, where they perform essential services, and they therefore perhaps have more bargaining power because of how they are able to stop public transport from functioning. We do not see as much labor unionization and labor power in the other sectors.
This is not the first time that workers in the airline industry have gone on strike. That happened in 2019 when flight attendants at Eva Air also launched a huge strike that lasted for close to a month. How did those strikes work in the past? Were they effective? And do you think that what do you think rather that this strike this year will achieve?
In the past, when such labor unionization activities happen, because of how they do disrupt services, they are negotiated and they do come to a resolution relatively quickly. I do expect that there could, the negotiation, the current labor union activity now should also achieve some positive outcomes based on past precedents.
That was labor rights activist Roy Ng speaking to TaiwanPlus reporter Stash Butler. A senior police officer in Tainan in southern Taiwan has been released on bail after being arrested on suspicion of extortion. Zhuang Wunen was arrested on Saturday in a rural area of Hsinchu County in northern Taiwan. Police got a tip-off from an individual who said Zhuang was trying to blackmail them for around $325,000. Zhuang first tried to escape the arresting officers by ramming his vehicle into their cars. He surrendered after officers fired shots into his tires. Zhuang was taken into custody along with a female passenger and was released after posting bail on Sunday. Speaking on the same day, Tainan's police chief accepted blame for Zhuang's behavior.
我个人没有做好，我也坦然面对自己应该负的责任，向市长以及署长来自请处分。
Taiwan will send a special envoy to the funeral of Pope Benedict XVI, set to take place on Thursday. The presidential office said former Vice President Chen Jianren would attend to show Taiwan's deep friendship with the Vatican. Chen served as President Tsai Ing-wen's deputy for 4 years and is a practicing Roman Catholic. The Vatican is one of only 14 states that has full diplomatic ties with Taiwan and the only one in Europe. Taiwan rang in the new year this weekend, and with the new year comes new government regulations. Eric Liao takes a look at what policy changes are now in effect.
Taiwan welcomed 2023 with a huge fireworks display at the iconic Taipei 101 skyscraper. And as people were making New Year's resolutions, the government made some New Year's regulations. Several new policies took effect on January 1st. They include everything from civil rights to economics to environmental protection. Let's take a look at some of the highlights. First, lots of changes for the country's young people. They are now legally considered adults at 18 years old. Previously, it was 20. This means they can do things like open bank accounts and apply for credit cards without a parent's consent. The minimum age for marriage has also been standardized at 18. It used to be 17 for men, 16 for women. But 18-year-olds still cannot vote. That's because a referendum to lower the voting age from 20 failed to pass in November. There's good news for people who are making minimum wage. That is being hiked for the 7th straight year. As of January 1st, the minimum monthly paycheck went up by about $37 to just over $850. The hourly rate also went up by about 25 cents to nearly $6 an hour. Those are both hikes of about 4.5%. They will benefit about 2.3 million workers. And with ongoing inflation, every little bit helps. There's also a major change in place for Taiwan's judicial system. Ordinary citizens will now help decide some criminal cases. Taiwan courts don't have juries, only professional judges. Now, the 3 judges will be joined by 6 citizen judges. They'll begin by hearing homicide trials before expanding to other major criminal cases. The citizen judges will have a say in both the verdicts and the sentencing. The goal is to boost public confidence in Taiwan's judicial system. As for environmental policy, the government is ending subsidies for long-haul buses that run on gasoline and diesel. This year, if coach companies want to replace their old vehicles, they will only get financial assistance if they buy new electric buses. They're aiming to have 16 to 18% of the country's coach fleet be electric by the end of the year. This is part of the government's plan to only sell electric vehicles in the country by 2030. And those are the biggest policy changes in Taiwan to start off 2023. Hopefully, they help make a better year for everyone. Alex Chen, Irene Wu, and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's government is preparing a new plan to offer financial assistance to some homeowners. The Interior Ministry is working on a mortgage subsidy program, which is designed to help people on certain levels of income. Details of the initiative haven't been released yet, but it's intended to fight the effects of rising inflation. Taiwan's central bank raised interest rates 4 times in 2022. This has meant that mortgage holders have to pay an extra $1,100 on average each year. The program would be in addition to an existing rental subsidy budget of almost $1 billion to help people afford housing. Nearly 30% of people who traveled to Taiwan from China on Sunday tested positive for COVID-19. Taiwan began testing arrivals from China on January 1st. Of the 524 people who landed in Taiwan that day, 146 tested positive for COVID. They will have to isolate for 5 days following the positive test results. Rising COVID infections in China and the easing of the country's travel restrictions have prompted a surge in vaccinations in Taiwan. This includes Taiwanese people who will live and work in China.
因为他们会担心，就是目前大陆的疫苗保护力可能不够，再加上疫情的泛滥，第一个回来避难，第二个他们还是想要寻求一些国际性的疫苗。
A reporter from the Beijing News revealed a severe shortage of COVID-19 medication in rural China, contradicting state media reports. Sally Ensign has the story.
Sick beds and oxygen tanks in hospital corridors. 70 patients treated in just 2 hours in a village clinic. These are images from a health system in rural China that's under severe strain.
最缺少的有最基本的现在止痛的抗病毒的那类型的。退烧有没有吗？也是紧缺的。
Now, a reporter from the Beijing News has exposed the extent of the problem in the country's rural southwest. In many villages, elderly people must walk 2 hours to get medicine. The Beijing News account challenges the official narrative that COVID-19 medication has reached those living outside major cities.
这些药品和抗原已经发放到基层。
Chinese state media has U-turned recently, saying that the Omicron variant is less severe than previous strains. That's as COVID cases have been surging across the country.
会出现比较多的感染的患者，这是很显然的。 而且它一定会有一定比例的肺炎的病人。
The Beijing News, which is owned by the Chinese Communist Party, says the drug shortage has been resolved. But questions remain about the true extent of COVID in China.
It's actually quite difficult to understand what's going on in China right now. It's a massive country. There are lots of controls on information. So what we're able to tell comes in bits and pieces from social media as well as the official media. There seems to be some difference between what's being reported. Social media seems to be saying that in some places there are lots of hospitalizations. There are lots of bodies at morgues and crematoria. The official media is seeming to play down the infection numbers, but of course, China is a massive country. It could possibly be the case that we have some hospitals and some morgues in some places being overwhelmed and other places that are not.
While media accounts of the truth may differ, for those living in rural China, a lack of medical resources means COVID could make this an extremely difficult winter. Asnaya Zhou and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, we visit a temple putting the bunny into this year's lucky money. Stay tuned.
Hi, it's Sharon here on Legit Mando. Today we're teaching the Mandarin words.
我可以拜托你一件事吗？我求求你。
拜托
Please, please, I beg you.
我们来哈拉两句啦。要聊什么？我是你的妈鸡吗？
Just love your maji. Life is short anyways.
太狂了吧
and use these to respond to literally anything. You already sound like a Taiwanese.
Legit Mando, Monday to Friday, 7:50 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Hong Kong's government is working on a legislative amendment that would bar foreign lawyers from sensitive political cases. This comes after Beijing handed down a legal interpretation that gives Hong Kong's leader the power to prevent foreign lawyers from taking part in national security trials. Current leader John Lee requested the interpretation last month. That was just as pro-democracy media mogul Jimmy Lai was due to go on trial for offenses under the Beijing-imposed national security law. The government opposed Lai's choice of barrister, the prominent UK human rights lawyer Timothy Owen. Lee took the matter to Beijing after Hong Kong's highest court rejected the government's objections. For more on the implications of this ruling, Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick spoke with lawyer and rights activist Kevin Yam.
How does this ruling from the National People's Congress Standing Committee affect judicial independence and the rule of law in Hong Kong?
Ultimately, it is a rule of law issue because what it is saying is that the chief executive of Hong Kong and more widely the National Security Committee set up under the National Security Law have powers to deem things to fall under the remit of national security and then make directions on what needs to be done about it. And that includes situations in relation to court cases, and that their decisions and their directions and any certificates that they issue under this are not subject to any legal challenge. So basically what we're saying is that we've now got a political leadership that can now just decide whatever they think is national security and deem it as such, and then they can essentially rule by decree. They can overrule the courts, they can overrule the legislature, they can overrule anything really. And so fundamentally that breaks the rule of law in a very big way.
What about the right to choose legal representation that one wants? This ruling comes after some big changes to the legal aid system in Hong Kong. So what is the state of the right to counsel there?
The reality is that even on this very important fundamental question of the right to legal representation, the Hong Kong government has been chipping away at it. So there used to be a system, and there still is in a way, a system of legal aid where people who couldn't afford to hire their own lawyers can, subject to a number of rules, get the government to give them some financial support towards getting their own lawyer. But now legal aid system and so on, they're now saying that, well, it's got to be, essentially, it's got to be the lawyers of our choice. Now, this combined with the latest inclination of the Hong Kong government to say, no, you're not going to we're not going to let you just choose whatever counsel you want for national security cases. We might put in various rules around that. That, in a way, flies in the face of the fundamental right to choose your own lawyers. And it's very, very worrying.
Ostensibly, this ruling only affects national security related cases. But do you think that there are wider implications that affect the integrity of the whole system and even non-national security, non-political cases as well?
I think a lot of focus, and in fact the government wants it to be so, is a focus on the idea that this interpretation is all about how they're restricting the right to legal representation in national security cases. But if you look at the actual ambit of the interpretation, basically any policy area which the National Security Committee deems to fall under national security remit, they can deem it as such, and then they can make directions on what they think needs to be done about it, and everyone else has just got to follow that without challenge. So what's to stop at national security cases? What's to stop at litigation? We can look at any policy area. We can look at education. We can look at financial regulation. We can look at the regulation of professions. You name it. The sky's the limit for the National Security Committee.
That was Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick speaking with lawyer Kevin Yam. North Korea has sacked the second most powerful military official in the country, according to state media. Pak Jong-chon had served as vice chairman of the Central Military Commission since April last year. This military position is second only to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Pak was reportedly replaced by Ri Yong-gil at the ruling party's Central Committee meeting last week. Footage shows Pak with his head down during the meeting. His seat was later shown unoccupied. Pak's dismissal comes after Kim called for an exponential increase in his country's nuclear weapons arsenal. Thousands of passengers remained stranded outside the Philippines' main airport on Monday. A New Year's Day power outage at Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila caused travel chaos. Nearly 400 flights were delayed, canceled, or diverted, affecting 65,000 passengers. On Monday, long queues formed as travelers tried to rebook their flights. Officials say it could take up to 3 days for services to return to normal. Back in Taiwan, the southern city of Tainan will celebrate 400 years of history next year, marking the time since the Dutch arrived on the island. In preparation, excavators have been at work and have found thousands of historic artifacts. Louise Watt reports.
This archaeological team is excavating a plot of farmland in a district of Tainan. They've chosen this spot because records show it used to be a settlement of the indigenous Soraya people. They've already unearthed around 4,000 relics, including these.
在这一次的发掘中，有出土了数颗的青铜铃铛。据族人表示呢，这可能是运用在西拉雅的传统服饰中。那因为台湾是不产青铜的，所以呢，这也代表着一个很重要的意义，是西拉雅过去跟这个外来者去进行一个贸易的交流的一个证据。
The Soraya dominated this western part of Taiwan when the Dutch first arrived in 1624. But their language and culture faded after the arrival of Han Chinese in the 17th century. The unearthed items include shells, pottery, and animal bones, including Sika deer bones, charred and with hatchet marks, showing that the animals had been cooked and eaten. The team invited young Soraya and other local people to join in with their work at a long-lost settlement.
我们找到了过去只有在口述传说中所出现的这样一个骁龙的旧社，透过实际去接触到祖先所遗留下来的这些物质文化遗留，希望西拉雅人可以有机会透过这样一个考古的发掘，去诠释他们自己的历史。
This painstaking work is part of the run-up to celebrations for the 400th anniversary of Tainan's establishment. The Soraya's role on this land is slowly being pieced together, connecting the past with the present. Howard Zhang and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Zhushan Zinan Temple in central Taiwan's Nantou County is famous for supposedly bestowing wealth on its worshippers. Every New Year's Day, the shrine hands out seed money, symbolic coins that are supposed to attract prosperity for their holders in the new year.
Thousands, if not tens of thousands of people line up outside of this temple early on January 1st. You might think that after a night of celebrating New Year's Eve, everyone would be tempted to rest the next day. But that's not the case for these worshippers. They're here to try and cash in on some divine power. Zhushan Zinan Temple in central Taiwan's Nantou County is closely associated with financial success. People who win the lottery often say that they did so after they prayed here. After all, Zinan Temple houses the god of prosperity. On New Year's Day, the temple gives out seed money, a symbolic coin that's supposed to bring holders piles of cash in the new year. This year's seed money prominently features a rabbit, the zodiac animal of the upcoming Lunar New Year. Seed money collection is no joke. People line up for days beforehand to make sure they can get theirs. You might think these people represent a small number of dedicated worshippers, but that's far from the case. Aside from giving out seed money, the temple also held a lucky draw. The top prizes this year were rings made from gold held by the temple's idol. It's about to be the year of the rabbit, and people are doing whatever it takes to get their share of some bunny money.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of thousands of people having a New Year's dive in the North Sea off the Netherlands. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.